Welcome to episode 36 of 1530. Today we're going to be talking about some Maiden Masters titles. We've had a couple guys recently win their first Masters 1000 titles. Pretty big deal. I know a lot of players actually don't end up even winning any. I know Raonic has been in, I think, 3 or 4 finals, but he's never won one. But I think with the absence right now, the big three a little bit, especially with COVID concerns or injury concerns for Federer, there's been some opportunities for these young players to win some Maiden Masters 1000. So one guy that was able to win one was Stefanos Tsitsipas. We all know he's won the ATP finals 2 years ago, but he was able to win his first Masters 1000 title. He beat Andre Rublev, kind of his budding rival there. He beat him in Monte Carlo. And the stat of the day is 86%. So that's the percentage of first serve points won by Tsitsipas on his first serve, and that's if that number seems high to you, it is a little bit high, especially for clay court. That's pretty insane. That's something that you usually see on like a faster hard court or a grass court. Something Roger Federer or maybe even Isner, one of the bigger servers, is having, and he's having that against Rublev, who is a pretty solid returner on a clay court. So pretty amazing by Tsitsipas. And another stat to go along with that is overall he won 79% of his service points won. So again, another ridiculously high number, meaning again, he's able to just dictate with that serve, and his attacking tennis is working well on clay, which I think is pretty interesting. We talk a lot about clay and a lot about Nadal's grinding style, but I think Tsitsipas is finding ways to win on clay that maybe are more like Roger Federer or even Robin Soderling, if you remember that name from back in the day, doing well. But there's Tsitsipas. Any thoughts on that, Matt, on Tsitsipas getting his first Masters 1000 and kind of the clay swing in general this year?
Yeah, it was only a matter of time, right, before Tsitsipas finally started bringing home the hardware. Good for him. And I think it's the first of a lot. I think it'll be interesting. It'll be interesting to see as the big three start to manage time a lot more. I don't want to say it dampens the tournament win, but it makes it easier. Yeah, right. It's a different conversation, but no, it's still difficult to get all the way through a tournament and to get the final win. So, no, that's great.
Yeah, and that being said, I mean, you're definitely right. I mean, Federer obviously wasn't there. Kind of doing some more training. I know still recovering from his injury, but Nadal and Djokovic were there in the tournament. They just lost pretty early on. They lost. Djokovic was second round, and Nadal was quarterfinal. So Tsitsipas didn't have to face either of them. Rublev did the hard job beating Nadal, like the what is it, 11-time champion or something ridiculous?
Yeah,
12 times in Monte Carlo. So Rublev did the hard job. Tsitsipas, we still had to beat some good players, and then Dan Evans took out Novak Djokovic in a shocking straight setter. That was kind of interesting to watch. But yeah, it's a good point though. Like Shane, the big three are not going to be in every tournament anymore. And so more and more room for these guys. I know Rublev has been dominating the Masters 500s. I think he has the longest streak for winning, or maybe that just got broken. But he won Rotterdam this year, won Hamburg and some other ATP 500s, Dubai. Because, the big three, they're really not showing up in a lot of these 500 tournaments. So Rublev has clearly been a benefactor for that. But, yeah, it'll be interesting, like you're saying, the other players who can fill the power vacuum, you could say, right? Mm-hmm. Who's going to take up these ranking points? So I think Rublev's at a record high ranking 7. So I think you just push Federer down another notch. So, yeah, it's crazy times in the tennis world, not only due to COVID, but just these young players get better and better.
Yeah, certainly. It's good. It's good tennis. Nice to see new faces up there.
Yeah. 2 other young guys we'll talk about real quick. So Miami Masters, another Masters 1000. This one, as you were talking about, Matt, not all the big three were there. In fact, this is the first tournament since 2004. The 2004 Paris Masters, was the first time that there was no member of the big three competing. Up to that point, there was at least one member of the big three in every Masters tournament. This, again, is going back to 2004. So pretty crazy because Fed was out for injury, and Nadal and Djokovic didn't want to travel to the U.S. for COVID concerns, I think is what they said. So, and then Medvedev lost in the quarters. He's kind of struggled since his Australian Open finalist, being a finalist there. So he's kind of struggled since, but this gave room for a new Masters 1000 champion once Medvedev lost. So Murray Thiem and Wawrinka pulled out of the tournament, and so Cilic was actually the only major champion who was at the tournament. And we know Cilic has kind of been struggling, I think, the past kind of couple years. So we had Jannik Sinner, the young Italian. I don't know if you've seen him play or seen his game style, but kid is 19, but he can play. He's really, really good on both wings, forehand and backhand. People talk about him as like a young Djokovic, but that guy has some serious power, really good shot making, good at the net, good at everything pretty much. But he was defeated in straight sets by Herbert Hurkacz, which he's another young guy who had to beat plenty of good people like Tsitsipas and Rublev on his way to his maiden Masters 1000. So again, another new guy winning Masters 1000. That's pretty hard to do. I don't care if the big three aren't there or not. He still had to beat some good names. So
no doubt.
I think Isner won his first one too in Miami. That was last year over Zverev. So pretty cool. Or maybe that wasn't last year. A couple years ago, because Federer's the most recent defending champ, and Isner made the final again, but Federer beat him while Isner was kind of injured. But so again, pretty cool. Like you're saying, the new faces are fun to watch. People keep talking about how this Jannik Sinner, he's kind of the future of the game. We already know Tsitsipas and Rublev are kind of the present of the game. And then Nadal, Djokovic, Federer, they don't seem to go away either. So pretty fun stuff, though. Let's see. And Matt, let's talk real quick before we jump into some numbers, because I want to obviously jump into the numbers for all these matches. But talk to me about Dominic Thiem. I haven't really been hearing too much about him, except for negative things, maybe. What's going on with Dominic?
Yeah, well, I don't have his phone number, unfortunately.
Bummer.
Can't just call him up, but and I'm sure most of our listeners who are going out of their way to find tennis podcasts have probably heard one of the interviews that he had recently, just kind of talking about the loss of focus maybe that he got after he won that first slam. Just kind of losing a little bit of motivation, and add on top of that, he's been dealing with some injuries. So I think it's just been a combination of that mental and physical game that has just led to less than his normal level of play in 21 so far. So he's had some pretty poor results so far.
Yeah, that's kind of a bummer. I know it's not a huge sample size, right? He's only played pretty poorly in the Australian Open. Kind of could tell maybe some injury was bugging him, but also just not his same fighting spirit against Dimitrov. But then I think he played in Dubai and Doha and lost pretty promptly in the first round there. So he hasn't played in the last two clay tournaments, and I don't know if he will before the French, even though his stated goal is to win the French Open. But like you're saying, just kind of struggling, maybe a little bit of a hangover from his US Open win, which is surprising because I feel like Thiem is always hungry, but really not seeing that from him this year. So hope he can get back on the right track. He was, in fact, one of the best players on hard court last year with, statistically, and he's been the second best clay quarter. You could argue Djokovic maybe, but he's made more French Open finals than Djokovic recently. So you could argue he's been one of the best clay quarters of the past, maybe even 4 or 5 years. So it'll be interesting to see how far he can go in the French Open this year.
Yeah.
Hopefully his body can cooperate.
Yeah. It's especially interesting to me, this self-diagnosed lack of focus when outside of Nadal, he's been, titled the Prince of Clay. He's been consistently competitive, consistently good on clay. And so in my mind, at least, and obviously I'm no pro athlete, but in my mind, it would make sense that, all right, even if I win the US or the US, I'm looking forward to the French. I'm looking forward to where I'm consistently good in competing well against Nadal, who is practically unbeatable in the French. So that's what's interesting to me is that, we've entered clay season and still haven't seen team, So I'm not complaining. If he's a little rusty going to Paris, that's fine by me. But
right.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how he plays in the French if he's able to play. And maybe he's got some physical problem that's causing more of a problem than anybody's aware of. But.
Yep. No, I agree with that. And just real quick for those, I know some of the rankings are a little bit in flux. It's a little complicated because I think COVID is kind of protecting some of people's rankings. Like I know Federer's been a major benefactor from that. But kind of want to run through the rankings real quick because I had a couple observations. So number one, of course, is Novak Djokovic, kind of far and away, of course. Winning multiple slams kind of helps you with that. Number two, Medvedev, right? Making the Australian Open final. And he's been really consistent at pretty much all the major events. So Medvedev. 3 is Nadal. Again, no surprises there. 4 is Thiem, right? He won the U.S. Open. Has a lot of points from last year. So he's 4. Tsitsipas has risen all the way up to 5. Doing really good. Zverev at 6. Rublev, like I said, 7, his career high. Federer at 8. Schwartzman at 9. Diego Schwartzman. And then 10 is Berrettini. So you're a little surprised at some of those. Maybe not the names in the top 10, but some of their positions. It's a little interesting. And Matt, I was just going through and looking at, okay, who plays pretty good on clay out of all those guys? So obviously you look at Djokovic, Nadal, those guys go pretty far in clay. We talked about Thiem. Usually goes pretty far in the clay season. Tsitsipas has proved it. Semifinals last year at Roland Garros. Won his maiden Masters 1000 at Monte Carlo. So Tsitsipas is clearly good on clay. Zverev has gotten a lot better on clay past couple years. Kind of like Murray, where Murray wasn't comfortable at all, and then all of a sudden makes a French Open final, starts going really far in the French. You have Rublev, again, he won Hamburg last year. He seems to go pretty far in clay. He made Monte Carlo final. Federer, even though, he gets a lot of criticism for clay, he's made 4 or 5 French Open finals. The guy's not a slouch. He just has to work a little harder, and he can be upset on clay. But if he's healthy, he could go potentially far. So, Schwartzman, obviously, clay is his best surface. Berrettini's not that bad on clay. So it's like all the top 10, we don't really have any specialists. The only one that's not good on clay was Medvedev, really. Yeah. And I don't even know why.
I'm ready.
He's suited for it. He's just not comfortable. So yeah, this French Open, if people are healthy, I think this could be really interesting depending on the seeding. So I'm not seeing as much of, Raonic isn't in the top 10. I know he struggles on clay. Some of these people that, more built for faster courts or clay or grass courts, I'm not seeing that in the top 10 right now, Matt. I'm seeing all the guys are really solid on ground strokes. All the guys seem to go or could go really far in clay. So just thought that was an interesting observation, except for Medvedev maybe, but.
Well, I agree. I think that's a good point. And I think you look at this past clay tournament where both Rafa and Djok crashed out. You look at those matches, and obviously it's just one match. And you can, we talked about last year how Nadal averages two clay tournament warm-up, 2 clay warm-up tournaments before the French, 2 to 2.5. So usually he's getting 1 at least. Anyway, what I'm trying to say is usually in the past I wasn't super worried about Nadal getting beaten in one of these warm-up tournaments, but I feel like he's looking a little rougher this year. I think if ever the door was open, it's happening here in 21. And just like you said, you've got the top 10 here who all, except for maybe one, are comfortable and confident on clay, have the ability to really go deep. So it'll be interesting to see what happens. I think if Rafa plays in the French the way he's been playing in these lead up tournaments, he's not gonna make it. But.
Yeah, I mean, in seeding is everything, right? Matchups are everything,
and that's true.
He could match up. Dimitrov's not top 10, but he's seeded pretty high, and he seems to always have his number on clay. So all Nadal needs is a few matches. I think he's most vulnerable, as we've seen earlier rounds. Once he makes the final, I mean, I think pretty good. pretty good odds. But I think early rounds, that's when he's been upset. His fourth round, quarterfinals, that type of stuff. So, if he gets a dangerous draw, like you're saying, I think I never bet against Nadal. I've given up playing this game.
Sure.
Betting against him on the French. But if there's going to be a year and he gets kind of a rougher draw, it's not a guarantee. That's what we'll put it that way. It's not a guarantee he'll win. So, I think it's a good point, like you brought up. And if there's one guy I do not want to face, I don't care if I'm Djokovic or Nadal, I don't want to face Andrei Rublev on any surface, anywhere. That guy is such a tough out. Even Tsitsipas that beat him, he was playing some insanely offensive tennis. He was going for the lines. He was hitting them. He was playing beautiful variety, some drop shots. Like I said, some beautiful forehands. So, it takes a lot to beat Rublev. That guy's a fighter, and he can turn defense to offense really fast. I don't want to play him. I don't want to see him in early rounds. And Tsitsipas, he's shown it time and time again. 2 sets to love down against Nadal. Australian Open beats him. 2 sets to love against Djokovic down in Roland Garros. Pushes him to a 5th set. I don't want to see Tsitsipas, especially if I'm 2 sets to love up and thinking I'm good to go, because Tsitsipas will fight for every point. So I think everyone's dangerous, but those are a couple of guys that are looking like they're in pretty good form right now. So
agreed.
This could be interesting. Well, let's get into some numbers. I think we're talking pretty good narrative about what we're seeing. So first, let me just switch to a number that you were referring to. So I have some data I've compiled pretty much ever since Nadal started winning the French Open back in 2005. So this is showing the amount of tournaments that he has won, warm-up tournaments going into every year, because he's only not won the French 3 times. Once he lost to Robert Soderling in 2009. The other one he lost to Djokovic in 2016. And then the next year, 2017, he withdrew, I think, a wrist injury or something. So really only lost twice, but hasn't won it 3 times since he's been dominating the clay court tennis world in 2005. So going real quick through this, on average, he's won 2.5 warm-up tournaments. And for the listeners, the warm-up tournaments, you generally have 4 of them. Monte Carlo, Barcelona, Madrid, and Rome are the 4 that Nadal usually plays in all 4 of them. So he's usually winning a little bit over half, right? 2.5 of those. The years that he lost, interestingly enough, so the Robin Soderling one was kind of a fluke. He still won 3 of them, but the other 2 times he won 1 tourney, 0 tournaments in the year that was quarterfinal to Djokovic. So that was a little bit writing on the wall. And then the other year he won 2 of them. So still below his average. So kind of interesting. Last year was obviously there was only 1 clay court warm-up tournament, which he was quarterfinals in Rome. He still won the French, right? Nadal proved he's Nadal. He plays really good in the French Open, even though, again, it was in October. It was kind of an interesting year. But this year, we'll see. We'll have a little bit more of a bigger sample size. And like you're saying, Matt, what we're seeing so far, losing to Rublev, and then in Barcelona, kind of struggling, I think 2 3-set matches, one to a qualifier ranked outside the top 100, another to Nishikori, who's good, but still, it'll be interesting to see how Nadal does the rest of the way. And I'll be charting the data here to see if he gets close to his 2.5 tourneys won this year. And also I'm keeping track of his sets dropped, because there's also some correlations there. So more to come on that, and we'll definitely give you some more data right before the French Open to kind of give you a forecast for how Nadal is looking on clay, at least statistically. But yeah, I think it's interesting. Nadal is just so good. It's just weird to see him not be flawless on clay. But I think he's proved he can still get it done, even if he has to win ugly.
Mm-hmm. Agreed. And again, I mean, you go back to 5-setters are just always completely different beasts than a best of 3. So you add that extra set in there, and it makes it a lot more difficult to get out these big players.
Absolutely. All right, well, let's dive into some numbers. So I already kind of covered a little bit of Tsitsipas Rublev Monte Carlo final. So really just focusing on Tsitsipas's serve numbers. But real quick, let's talk about Rublev's serve numbers. So he was winning 80% of his first serve points won. So again, that's a crazy high number. Tsitsipas was 86%, but seeing 80% on a clay court match, again, I know Rublev is master of this too, is right after his serve, he's able to kind of put away that first shot. That first shot is offensive. But for his second serve points won, it was 33%. That's going to be hard to win any match if you're doing that at 33%. So think that was kind of the moral of the story there, is Rublev needs to figure out how to protect his second serve better on clay, at least against Tsitsipas. But his first serve and his points going off of his first serve were excellent. So that's the main thing I wanted to talk about there. I think that was the main reason why Rublev lost. He was struggling on the return game in general, and then he couldn't defend his second serve. And Tsitsipas and all his variety were able to take advantage. And he played, like I said, pretty much flawless. He didn't even face a break point. So
yeah, that's what I was about to say. That's a good match if you don't face a single break point.
It's pretty hard. Okay, so let's move on to Rublev Nadal. So Matt, let's hear your take on Rublev Nadal. If you got the numbers in front of you there.
Yeah, I got it.
Have a Nadal fan look at it. I'll tell you my first. I'll tell you my first thought though before you go. My first thought is just the second serve points won Nadal. It was only 42%, and usually his second serve ones are even better than his first serve generally. His first serve was not great. It was 56%. But okay, I mean, you can win off of that if your second serve is 56%. And again, like with his clay numbers, I feel like his first and second serve are about the same. Sometimes his second's even better. So I'm not used to seeing any time he wins a second serve points below 50%, but especially on clay, I feel like it's usually closer to 60. So that was my first impression.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's oh, sorry.
No, that's it. That's all I have.
That's my biggest concern, right? I sit here and say, well, if ever there was a year where he looked weak, this is it. His serve has been a point of major improvement in the past years, such that he can really use it as a weapon. And at the moment, it's disappeared. I don't know what's happened. I don't know if he's having back problems still or what's going on, but it's not the same serve that we've seen recently from Rafa that's allowed him to be successful on the court. And so you brought it up in his loss to Rublev. And I think unless he can really find that again, he's going to have a problem.
Yeah. The other interesting one is just looking at his double faults. And so maybe there's a pattern, or maybe it was just a fluke, one data point match, but 8% double fault rate seems pretty high for Nadal. Again, don't know what his average is, but I'm assuming it's much less than that. So a little concerning there. But again, maybe it's just one bad day. Maybe Rublev is making him uncomfortable, or maybe, like you're saying, symptoms of a bigger problem overall. I'm not quite sure yet. Looking at serve numbers. So another thing to watch: Nadal serve, second serve, double faults on the clay court. See if he can get it done in Barcelona and beyond, Madrid, Rome, and of course Paris. Okay. Anything else to say on Rublev Nadal?
Just that, if you want to look at break points as well, Nadal only converted 4 of the 12 chances that he had to break Rublev. So not super high, 33%. I mean, obviously it's tough to get the break. It's tough to get that point, but I don't know. I feel like that's low. I don't have any numbers to back that up, what his average normally is, but.
No, I'd agree with that, especially on clay. I think if it was a different surface, maybe I'd say that's fine, but I think for clay, I'd agree. That seems low to me as well. Let's see here. So I'm trying to pull up Nadal's clay this last year. Let's see. Career versus last 52 weeks. Be interested to see some of these numbers here. But let's move on real quick while I'm pulling that up. So I think, that's pretty much all I had with Rublev. Again, Rublev's pretty dangerous no matter what. It was interesting to see Rublev's second serve points won were actually kind of low even against Nadal. They were even lower against Tsitsipas, but 42%. Maybe Rublev got a tiny bit lucky there that Nadal was serving so poorly on his second serve, but Rublev, I think, has got to figure that out. I don't know what he needs to do because he's a solid server, so I don't know. He's just getting a lot of pressure on that second serve. But all right, and overall, let's talk real quick too. Again, Rublev won 53% of the total points won to Nadal's 47%. So, we talk about tennis. It can be just a couple points here and there, but if you're winning 51, 52, especially 53% of the total points won, that's pretty dominant. I think we did some numbers before. If you win 52% of the total points won, it's like a 90% chance you're going to win the match. It's extremely high. I think only something like a tiebreak or something would throw off those numbers. So it was not like it was a tight 7-6 that Rublev beat Nadal on. It was a solid match win for him. Hopefully something he can build on, and something Rafa will want to either forget or learn from. So let's move on to Dan Evans. This is the most surprising one. I mean, not that Evans isn't a solid player, but to me, first of all, the clay. I didn't realize he was that good on clay. I knew hard court he can be fairly crafty on, but Djokovic is one of the most solid people on clay besides Rafa, and he lost in straight sets. So let's look at the numbers behind it. I know Evans used a ton of slice on the backhand, was probing with the forehand like he always does, but Djokovic was missing tons of shots. So let's go quick through here. Djokovic double faults were, again, kind of high like Nadal, 6%. Dan Evans didn't look like he double faulted at all. His second serve points won were 46%, so in the 40s like Nadal. Of course, Evans was about the same, 46%, so both really low. He only saved 29% of his break points to Evans' 70%, so just wasn't quite mentally ready to save those points. Let's see what else is going on here. And then first serve points won. Evans, his serve is okay, but he won 62% of his first serves to Djokovic's 57. So, I would think even on clay, Djokovic should be winning, a decent amount, way above 60, I would say, and he was not even at 60%. So, again, I don't know if it was just a bad serving day for Djokovic. He talked about after the match, it was the worst match he could remember playing. No positives to take from it. He just played bad. It was all on him. Not much credit to Evans because he played so bad. And kind of from the highlights I saw, maybe that's true, but I don't know if something's bugging Djokovic or if he's just uncomfortable on the clay right now. But he looked pretty bad. We'll put it that way. Again, with the percentage of points won, Evans won 52.5% of the total points won, right, to Djokovic's 47.5. So again, had you just looked at these numbers and not the score line, you would know Evans like a 90-something% chance of winning the match. And he did. He won it in straight sets. Again, no 7-6, no tiebreak. It was pretty much all Evans. So anything to say, Matt, about the Evans-Djokovic match there?
No, I'm sure it's a blip. But
yeah,
it'll be interesting to see. Do you know, because Joke's not playing Barcelona, is he planning on playing any other warm-ups?
So he's playing right now. Instead, he's doing like the Serbian Open, which I didn't realize they did a clay one, but he's playing that instead.
Okay.
There's some other decent players there, not maybe not to the caliber of Barcelona, but he's doing that one, and I think he's planning on doing Madrid and Rome.
Gotcha.
So I think he's planning for all of them, except for he swapped Barcelona for the Serbian Open. So
go to the home country.
Go to the home country, just like Federer's planning to play the clay, but he's only planning to do, at least from what I heard, Geneva, which is the week before the French Open. Then he'll do the French. So I haven't heard of him playing Madrid or any of these other ones, but same thing. He's going to do the home clay court and then see what happens in the French. So it'll be exciting to see Federer out there. Just watching him in general, but also, he is kind of fun to watch on clay as well. His variety.
Absolutely.
Okay. But yeah, like you're saying, I kind of agree that's more of a blip, I think, for both, for Evans and for Djokovic especially. But
yeah.
Evans did say, he's like, yeah, Djokovic, he's making me wait in the locker room a lot longer than normal. So he's like, I was already pretty annoyed. So he's like, I feel like there's extra motivation. I thought that was pretty funny. It's like, you need extra motivation to play the top-ranked player in the world, but, players have their different ways to get motivated, I guess.
Yeah. Maybe put a little more ice in his veins.
Yeah, exactly. Let's see. Yeah, and here's another one. Return points won for Djokovic, 44%. That seems pretty low. And maybe he wouldn't quite make 50% on that, but he'd at least be higher 40s is what I'm guessing that we'd see there. But let me just check. All right. Matt, do you want to run us through this, the Miami final while I try to pull up some Nadal numbers real quick?
Sure, let me pull it up.
All right. So this is one, again, for the listeners, this was Herbert Hurkacz against Yannick Sinner. So pretty interesting. I think this one did have a 7-6 tiebreak in the match. And Sinner was one, of course, this was his maiden. That means they're both their maiden Masters 1000 final. And yeah, Sinner was super solid, but still lost to Hurkacz, which, he was feeling everything, which is pretty cool.
So, okay. Yeah. I mean, this is interesting. The first thing you look at, right, are your first serve points won and your second serve win percentage. And Hurkacz had actually a 35% win percentage on his second serve. That's pretty low, right? Especially for a win compared to Sinner's 48.4%. But the difference is on that first serve. So Hurkacz was winning 70% of his first serve points, whereas Sinner was down at 55%. So that's probably where your major difference is coming. Hurkacz didn't save any of his break points. Let's see how many he faced. I'm only looking at percentages here. 1 second. So if you look at the raw data, so that's interesting. So Hurkacz had 11 break chances on Sinner, whereas was only faced with 3 break points. Sinner converted all 3 of those, but man, when you're giving up 11 break chances, that's tough. So, so did this go to a tiebreak again? Yeah. And that makes more sense, right? So the first set was a tiebreak 7-6, and then 7-4, and then 6-4. So, yeah. So I mean, that first serve win percentage, was able to control the match with that. Cruise straight set wins. Is Sinner is this the matchup? There are 2 players that in the span of like 4 tournaments played 4 times. I think this is them, and I think that Sinner beat Hurkacz the first 3 times.
Oh, really? I didn't realize that.
I could be wrong, but I think that's right. I remember seeing something about it. Hurkacz, I think, actually started saying something to the effect of "Stop scheduling the draws this way," because I just keep crashing out to Sinner. But
it's just the way that it worked out. No, that's funny. That's really funny.
But I guess he finally got revenge if that is the situation.
So yeah, let me take a quick peek over here on the catch. Yeah, Sinner's just amazing to watch. The players. I think one of the players that he beat early in the week, I think it was Bublik. I believe he's a Russian. He's been actually doing really well in this kind of COVID bubble without fans. But he was like, "Man, you're not human." After the match, kind of shaking hands, but all like making jokes with him, but honestly, like, dude, you're too good, man. Like, and Sinner's like, "Wait, what?" Kind of confusing. Because Sinner kind of had to come back in that match. And another player that Sinner beat, who is really good on all surfaces, but especially hard court and clay, has been Roberto Batista Agut, which he won in a tight match in Miami. And then he just beat him in Barcelona today. So, Sinner's shown some great mental, I think anybody needs mental strength to beat Batista Agut because he's so consistent, so hard to get past him. Someone like Sinner who can play very offensive, I could see him being frustrated and trying to go for too much, but very good composure by the young guy. That Miami match, I watched some decent highlights there, and that was a tough one for him, I think. So he could definitely be the future here. And if anybody remembers from last year, the French Open, he actually gave Nadal a scare, and I'll say a scare because Nadal won every match in straight sets last year. But at the French Open. However, a couple of the sets were tight, and Sinner was playing really well. I think he even went up a break in at least one set, and he was playing some very offensive tennis for clay. And people were, man, this guy. That's when I first really kind of took notice of Sinner was against Nadal because he held his own, still lost, but he played pretty well. Let's see. And then, like I said, I was going to pull up some numbers for us for Nadal. So here's what I want to look at. Matt, I think your hunch was kind of right on. So you look at his clay court numbers over his career. So his career, this is pretty awesome too. Just 92% of matches won on clay. First career. That's an amazing number. And I know, okay, people would say French Open. I know he's only lost a couple times, but this is including all the warm-up tournaments. That's pretty amazing. 92% clay court matches. So this year he's won 85% of those matches. But here's where it gets interesting. So his return numbers are honestly better in a lot of ways, especially on the first serve. He's winning 6% more first serve return points. And now it could be a small sample size, so maybe it'll kind of average out as we go on. He's winning 8% more break points. But if you go to the serve numbers are worse. But the ones that are worse it's weird. It's like the first serve percentage, which usually we say maybe doesn't matter as much. But he's serving 6% worse on the first serve percentage. So he's having to play more second serves. His double fault rate is only 0.5% worse, saying it's 2.4%. So again, that Rublev match when it was 8% was maybe just a bad day for him. Seems to have figured it out since. But he's winning, or he's saving 1.5% fewer break points saved, which I know isn't a ton, but when it comes to break points, when one or two can kind of tilt a match, that's kind of interesting. So I don't know how much to read into this yet, but I know obviously the results aren't quite there, at least in the first tournament, maybe first tournament and a half. So we need to watch his serving, like you were saying, Matt. Especially let's look at the first serve, because that's what I thought. His first serve percentage usually is a lot higher on clay. He does it on purpose, I think. Takes some speed off, tries to get it the first one in and win the point. But I don't know, kind of some food for thought. Again, I think it's a small sample size. Don't read too much into it, but we should pay attention to the Nadal serve, like you were saying.
Agreed.
All right. And then lastly, let's talk numbers for Federer. So I don't think we were able to talk about this last time. So he lost to, first he beat Daniel Evans, in a tight 3-set match. And Evans is interesting. That was like his practice partner. So that was, I think, they kind of knew each other's games, what was going to happen. But he beat him in a tight match for his opener, and that was cool. But then he lost to Nicolas Baishvili, even though he had a match point that he wasted against him. And Baishvili actually went on to win Doha, win the entire tournament. But regardless, I think we should talk about the numbers here that Federer put up. Didn't play horrible, but did show some signs of rust and obviously lost. First of all, he was serving pretty fantastic. He aced 12.5% for his ace rate, which is amazing. No double faults. His first serve points won were 67%. So not super high for Federer, even for a hard court. Kind of maybe 10% lower than I would expect, but still serviceable. 50% on second serve points won. That's fine as well. And then saving a decent amount of break points, but the return is really where it kind of showed that Federer, I don't think, is where he needs to be. And maybe that's why he went back to do some training. So he only won 23% of first serve points won. So again, you want to be closer, maybe 10 points higher than that, closer into the 30s. And then second serve return points won were 50%. That was pretty good. But then he was only able to convert 20% break points won. So really, Federer's got to get better on that first serve return, and then hopefully be able to grid out some more break points. And again, a lot of that's just your movement, right? And your, maybe some practicing to get a feel better for those returns. A lot of that is maybe reflexes or just standing in the right spots, or the explosiveness needed to go and chase down those first serve returns. But I think that's really what killed him in that match against Baishvili. He did have some rusty shots that he just shanked, but overall his movements, I think, got to improve, and I think he recognizes that. So interesting there. And another interesting one, so 52%. Baishvili won 52% of the points for the match to Federer's 48%. So I know we say 52%, you're pretty much going to lose, but Federer did have a match point in this at one point in this match. So it was a 3-setter. So maybe I think Baishvili started winning more points as it went on. So maybe it wasn't 52% at that time when Fed had a match point, but still an interesting data point regardless. Federer just, had a chance to win it, but I think more training will hopefully do him good, because I know he's trying to peak at the right time for the grass season. So any thoughts on Federer, Matt?
I think it just shows that there's understandably some rust that Fed needs to knock off, and hopefully he can do that here before the French starts. We'll see.
Yeah.
If be good to see him competitive again.
Yeah, totally. I'm just excited to watch any points he can play. It's just fun to watch Federer in general craft a point, but the French might be tricky for him. Best of 5, Clay playing a little slower. I think, definitely be ripe for an upset, but it would just be interesting to see, regardless, win or lose, how his match fitness is in the French. Can he go a 5? Can he go a 5th set, or is he? He's king. I still don't think he's defaulted a match. Has he met or what's the word? Retired from a match. Pretty sure he hasn't still. Because I remember, I think it was 2 years ago against Dimitrov in the US Open, he could barely move, and I still don't think he defaulted that one or retired from that one, not defaulted, sorry. So I think he still holds that record, but yeah, it'll be interesting to see. 5 sets on clay would be brutal. So, all right. Well, any last thoughts for this episode?
That's everything.
Yeah, we kind of covered a lot because we hadn't done recording since basically post-Australian Open. We've had a short hard court swing. And again, no Indian Wells, really sad. It's one of our favorites. But we had Miami. We've had a couple clay court tournaments and a few more clay court tournaments to go. French Open actually pushed off a week. So the grass court season is being compressed a little bit. That kind of makes me sad. But
those Parisians, they always do whatever they want.
Do whatever they want. So... yeah, the COVID,
2 years in a row, man, they just don't care.
They don't care. Because I think they're hitting another wave with COVID, right? So they're everything's kind of shut down over there. So delayed it a week, but the French Open, been assured it's happening. Actually, even Wimbledon, they're if you guys remember last year, they actually got paid out for the insurance for pandemic insurance. Wimbledon paid for pandemic insurance and has been since 2000, basically since SARS, I think, early 2000s. So they didn't hold Wimbledon last year, but made some money off of the insurance. They paid out, but they said this year the insurance would not pay out for pandemic insurance. So Wimbledon said, we are having the tournament no matter what, whether it's closed doors. They're thinking there'll be at least some fans, I think, right now. But just a data point, I don't think Wimbledon will be canceled this year like it was last. And the French definitely won't be canceled because they'll just move it around the calendar. They don't care. So anyways, exciting. Very excited for Wimbledon. And actually pretty excited for some clay court tennis as well. So as always, visit us at cognitionsphere.com. And our theme music is brought to us by Kevin MacLeod with excerpts from his song Cool Rock. And please share our podcast with a friend that loves tennis. And take a minute to write a quick review if you're enjoying our podcast. And until next time, we will see you on the court.